listened have told us over and over again they're very scared to speak up. They're scared that they're going to be labeled as, that overbearing person, the hysterical parent, etc. And so, what's your advice in how you can be a good storyteller or advocate, which and not worry about the label, or do you worry about the label?
Uh, yeah, I don't know if there is a way to speak up and not get labeled as difficult. I think that happens. People do that in their mental models, like immediately, let's put you in a box. I mean, there are ways to speak up, and of course, being respectful. It's interesting when I do talks, I've learned over the years, like I always start with something positive, always, always, always. If I start with something negative, the audience shuts down. Like you can see them shutting down. It looks like the McDonald's drive-through window, right? Like it's like people, and then they're not open to listening to your message anymore. So I've learned no matter what's going on is I start with the positive. And then if I have something that's negative, because there are lots of negative things in healthcare, believe me, to say, I always try to frame it so it's constructive. So I would say, this is what happened. This is how I felt about it. And here's how I wish it could be better. So I think that the approach of how you talk to folks is really, really important. And I also make sure I add the gratitude part afterwards too, no matter what. And I'm not trying to Pollyanna. Believe me, I've been very angry about all sorts of things, especially during this pandemic. But I just think that people respond more to honey than it's just human nature to feel that way. And so really thinking about your approach, and is it a positive or a negative one? And you can get constructive feedback through, but you don't have to do it in a way that makes people immediately feel defensive and shut down. It wasn't until I finally spoke to a therapist that I was told, all you're feeling is normal. Really? I said tentatively. Yes, she said firmly. You're minimizing your own pain. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. 4 small words. I only began healing from cancer when I was given permission to feel again, to not be strong, and was allowed to acknowledge my own suffering. Avoiding this pain does not make it go away. How I wish I had encountered someone that sat down, looked at me in the eye, took my hand, and said to me, how are you really feeling? Let's talk about it. That person could have been anybody who works in a healthcare setting. It should not only be the mental health professionals who are tasked with acknowledging our emotional pain. Healers turn towards patients and families during their pain. A warm gesture, a kind word, or gentle touch reminds us that we're not alone and makes space for our suffering. While healthcare can sometimes cure, it is love that will heal us in the end.
Opening thoughts from our panelists. And I'm now ready to move into the next question to sort of explore those issues a bit deeper. I'd love to hear from each of you. You've described sort of what you see your bit of the future, some of the fundamental ideas and values that underlie it. What do you see are the building blocks to create a more responsive, innovative, and patient-centered and patient-partnered health system? I'm going to start with you this time, Sue.
So I just want to build on a bit what David said about system change. And I really believe there's 2 levels of change. There's system change, and there's also what we can do as individuals to make things better in our everyday lives. And in fact, Ducks in a Row is about that, about what we can do, what is within our power, within our serenity prayer, but what's in our control and what's not, as far as changing healthcare. So I have some very practical suggestions about what I believe from my perspective. I worked in patient engagement for many years, as well as being a breast cancer patient and also the mom of a child with Down syndrome, as I said. And my very practical suggestions are these. There's 3 of them. The first one is thinking of healthcare environments as healing spaces, not spaces that cause trauma to people. And you'd mentioned about creativity. I think leaning on the arts and the humanities is a really great way to start that. I think about things like, very practical again, soft music in the waiting rooms, turn off CNN and the TV, leaning on the visual arts and having spaces for storytelling. In fact, the last children's hospital I worked in, we started a book club, and we met with families together with staff to discuss the book that we were reading about healthcare. So really thinking about healthcare as being healing. I think that would be a reframing as opposed to traumatic, which I believe that it is, or it has been for me right now. The second thing is to create safe spaces for feedback. And this, to me, I get really stuck on this, is a thorn in my side. I don't think that those folks higher up in administration are open to honest feedback from either patients or people, clinicians, people who work from patients. And I think if we opened ourselves up to the experience of healthcare and what it's like to work in healthcare and also to be cared for in healthcare, and that includes the good, the bad, and the ugly, then I think that's where change would actually happen. And that hasn't happened so far. Like anytime I've had some constructive feedback, I get shut down as being, minimized, or I get called hysterical, or, people just really want me to go away. But one point I really want to make is that patients have lots of really great ideas, especially for those of us who are invested in the healthcare system. And what's interesting about creating safe spaces for feedback and for people to share their stories, there's an organization called Care Opinion in the UK, and they're also in Australia. And what that is an online system where people can share stories about their experiences in healthcare. And they've told me that 60 to 70% of those stories that are shared are actually good, positive stories, which I wish there was a mechanism for us patients to be able to say thank you, especially now during COVID, to the healthcare professionals that look after us. And then the 30 to 40% of stories that might be more negative, or what I like to say is constructive feedback, I think that that's how we get quality improvement, is when things go wrong. So, that's my second point. And my third point is, I hope we get to talk about patient engagement, because we talked about patient-centered care, I know is in the title, but really engagement is about outreach, and it means going out to the people and doing things together, I think, and beyond the boardroom. And like Tara had mentioned, going out to communities to finding out what's important to them is something that I think would really reframe healthcare as we see it today. And enough of the ivory tower stuff about people making decisions for us, so far removed with what real life is like, both at point of care in the hospital and out in communities.
Love all those ideas, Sue. Thank you so much. And I